we're doing is right. So the second thing I want to touch on mechanics is just the longevity, is being able to physically do it, as we just talked about. So in mechanics, I think the important thing is your setup, and I just want to demonstrate. Man, I really like this stool. I want to take this stool home with me. This is this is good compared to what we have. Let me just put it that way. This is. Have you ever sat on one of these? Man, this is nice. It's got hydraulics, padding. Yeah. So when you set up a drum set, and this is why it's difficult to play someone else's set, is because it's not set for you. But if you're setting up your set, one of the key things you need to focus on is positioning everything where that you can reach things without an extreme amount of physical effort. So you try to set your stool where that your leg is at a 90 degree, where to the knee joint you're perpendicular to the floor. If you're like this constantly, you're going to put a lot of pressure on your knees. So you want to put things where that you can sit comfortably for a sustainable amount of time. Again, because we are in an apostolic church and we're doing more than a 7-minute worship set. All right, so you need to be able to do that for a long period of time. So, all right, another thing is stretching. I was just advised on this recently because I've been experiencing so many problems with my hands. And if you work in a factory, you probably or perhaps may have encountered this, but just some very basic stretching exercises of the wrist just to open up the muscles in the forearm and the wrist. And you can start by just pulling your fingers back, not till it hurts, but just enough to feel some slight tension. Hold it for a 10 count, stop, and then pull down the opposite way for a 10 count, and that's it. Do both hands and do that for a 10 count. It's not a miracle cure, but it's enough to get the muscles opened up and woke up so that you can start getting things ready to go. All right, so I think that's important. A couple of basics on techniques is sitting in posture. What would it mean to you, and this is not a trick question, but what would it mean to you if you saw someone go to play the drums and they're sitting there like this? What's the piano player's answer? Look at me. Pay attention. All right, so you want to be alert, and I know this is very basic this morning. That's why I said for some of you this may be boredom extreme, but it's basic, but it's foundational, and for me I think it's very important. The other thing is how to hold the sticks. Has any drummer in here ever been taught the correct way to hold a stick? Or you just pick up a stick and go? I was never personally taught. I had to study this. I just picked up a stick and went. But there is a right and a wrong way to hold the stick to get maximum efficiency out of what you're doing, and to protect yourself. If you come in and you grip the stick like that and you're holding tight, you're not going to get very far. All right. So you want to grip the stick. You've got to find, there is a place right around there where that you can find balance with the stick, and your finger acts as a fulcrum, or the pivot point like on a seesaw. You want to come back from that just a little bit. Bring your finger back toward you a little bit to where the stick falls and bounces. If you come back so far that the stick just deadens out, you've come back too far. But you want to come back far enough that you get a bounce. That's called a rebound. And then you put your thumb and your index finger together, and you don't grip super tight, but you grip tight enough that you're not going to lose the stick. Quick story on how musicians make their mark. I was at my dad's preaching a couple weeks ago, and I played the drums while my wife and son sang. My son was on the piano, and so I went back to the drum set that I played on, Brother Wagner, as a 10-year-old. And it was a nice little flashback for me. I was kind of having fun. And I look up in the ceiling And I remember I think it was a Friday night church service, I remember playing, and it was, there was a low ceiling there, and a stick flew out of my hand and like an arrow, and it just stuck there. And I look up, and there's the stick. So I stood up, grabbed the stick, sat down, and just kept playing. So I'm playing 2 weeks ago, and I look up, and I see a hole in the ceiling tile. So I asked my dad for clarification after church. I said, have you replaced those ceiling tiles within the last 30 years? He said, no, they were here before I started pastoring. I said, that's from the stick. So you will make your mark, one way or the other. So grip the stick with enough, and if you have to wrap your sticks, there's wrapping for that. You can buy at a music store. But wrap the stick, grip the stick so that you don't lose it, and then just wrap the rest of your fingers around it without gripping a whole lot. You want most of your grip energy to be between the thumb and the index finger. So the next thing that's important from a technique perspective is to focus on the mechanics of how you play. This is where I say that the rights and wrongs are unnoticeable to most people. Musicians probably pick up on these cues quicker than anybody. My dad is not a musician, but one of the most important lessons I ever learned, it's a good life lesson, but it was a fantastic musician lesson for me, came from my father, and that was after a time in service where I had apparently laid an egg and I was just really down on myself. And he looked at me and he said, most people won't know what you don't tell them. I would have never known you messed up if you hadn't made a face and told me. So sometimes you just got to keep going. It's that important. So, but the mechanics of that is again, if you're seeking a proper method for longevity and performance of the sticks, is you don't want to play from the elbows. There are people that do it. The drummer for the Newsboys does it, and he seems to be very successful, but we're not doing a Newsboys concert at church. But he will play like the Energizer Bunny, right, straight from the elbows. You want to play most of your energy. You're going to move at the elbows, but you want to play most of your energy from the wrists. So there's a difference in being able to do, I apologize if that's a little loud, but there's a difference from going like this to, you may close your eyes and not realize a whole lot of difference, but the person doing it is going to feel a tremendous amount of difference. It takes less energy, and you can get more output from what you're doing. So that basic technique will help. So there are two things I want to cover here. One is called a single stroke roll. And this is where it gets probably the most boring for beginners, because everybody wants to ta-da-ta. Everybody wants to do that, but you don't start doing that. At least I've never found anybody that started doing that. So there's a way to get to that, and it's bores the daylights out of me, but it's necessary, because the only difference between this and that is tempo. But if you can't do that, do that. Because once you get that, you can go. And once you get that, you can go. The head bobbing is optional. All right, watch the movement of the stick. As I'm moving my wrist, I'm pivoting right here. I'm just holding the sticks for support with these fingers. So it's a lot different than arm swinging, okay? Everybody all right? All right, so the next thing is called a rebounding double stroke roll, and it's going to be a little difficult on this snare head because the skin's old. But we go back to what I talked to you about on holding the stick a proper way. In holding the stick, if you can hold it to where the stick bounces, you're not intentionally playing that second stroke. The stick is rebounding in a way that it's doing it itself. I was a little off there just because the snare is so difficult with the skin. You need a really tight skin to do that real effectively. But you can kind of hope you can get the sense there, though. I was not moving as fast as what it sounded like it was moving. That's from the rebound. So two techniques that are worth practicing. So just over and over again. And this is where you have to have a passion for the drums. If you don't have a passion for the drums, I'm sure this is meaningless for you. For that, I apologize. But if you have a passion for the drums, I can only speak for myself, but on a set, and half of it was on our lap. Because my teacher taught me how to play the drums on my lap just to rehearse the rhythmic motions. Because if I didn't have a set, it's similar to what we have now you can do on a drum pad. Except I did it on my legs. So it's kind of the same concept, but you want to practice so that you can get the rhythmic motions down pat. Does that make sense? All right, so I want to move to the actual drum set now and go over just a couple of warm-up exercises that are good to do. If I can do this without crashing everything. And if anybody needs or wants to move closer or stand up here, that's not a problem for me. So I think Gentry's heard most of this. I probably bored him stiff the first two drum sessions we had, trying to work on foundational tools. But before you can get to the complex, you have to master the basics. So a very good I've got a couple of warm-up exercises I want to show you to do 1 minute each. You can do this in a variety of different ways. It doesn't have to be loud. You could even, on a set like this, you could even have the set off and do it. It's just more about establishing the rhythmic motions and the destination of the stick. And I really would recommend this if you're in a position where you're playing a set that's not yours. Like this one, I have not had an opportunity to sit at this set since probably last year. So this will be a good warm-up practice session, all right? So you just get to join me. But the first one is doing a single stroke roll 4 times on all 3 toms and the snare, just over and over at a pace of around 60 beats a minute approximately, just to get warmed up. And it's just one. Do that for a minute. You can add different layers of complexity into it. You can speed it up. You can slow it down. You can. If you want to get real complex, go backwards. So that's exercise number 1. I'm about to lose my mic thing here. Exercise number 2 would be doing a single stroke roll, 2 beats on the snare and the upper left tom, then the snare and the lower tom. And it would look like this. So you can go various tempos and speeds with that as well. The other one would be a single stroke roll on the left, with the left hand on the top 2 toms, and then your right hand on the snare and the lower tom. Just over and over. All we're worried about is establishing rhythm and establishing location. One of the Achilles heels for a drummer is to constantly rim out with the stick as you're going around. Any drummers ever experience that and get frustrated as a result of it? No, I'm sure you haven't. I'm probably the only one. But doing a warm-up exercise helps you establish where the head of the tom is so that you can get the right location for your sticks. So you're going 4 times. So now it's just a combination of them. So now whenever you get set to play, you're warmed up, you know your locations, and you've got your rhythm established, you've got your muscles in your hands and your wrist ready to go, everything's warmed up, and now you're ready to play. Thank you. I'll tell you what I was taught. And I think you have to somehow judge this by the tone of the people you're with, especially if you know them. And if you don't know them, this is probably difficult. But what I was taught was, if you need to change something, change it for you. But before you walk away, change it back. Just establishing some common courtesy back to those people. And I can tell you, I've had a number of people come in after me, change everything, and then them walk off and me come back, and they didn't establish that courtesy, and it was quite frustrating. So I think personally it is okay, because you have to survive whatever you're doing, but I think just putting it back establishes respect. Any other questions? All right, I'll give this back to somebody. All right. I didn't have that on.
Wow, I am, like I said, I'm not a drummer.